Welcome back. This is another exciting edition of Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to highlight one of our charities of the month today on Tampa Home Talk. And in the house, we have Miss Karen Mertes with Fulfill Your Destiny. And she is empowering entrepreneurs affected by unforeseen tragedy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Katrina, for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. So I would love to talk to our listeners and tell them a little bit about Fulfill Your Destiny, your local Tampa Bay nonprofit organization here. And this whole thing started after a personal experience to you, which is, I think, how most nonprofits start, right?
I think you're right. Yes.
I would love to hear all about your story and your backstory. What happened to you personally that started Fulfill Your Destiny, and then we'll get into all the nitty gritty about what you do today to help people and who you help.
Okay, sounds great.
So, how long has it been around, the nonprofit?
15 years.
Okay, so 15 years. And going back 15 years ago, what happened that launched this whole beautiful nonprofit?
Sure. I was serving in our United States Air Force as a lieutenant colonel, and I was stationed here on MacDill Air Force Base. And the year happened to be 2007, and it was February 7th of that year. It happened to be a Wednesday evening, 7:20.
I think I said it before, Karen, but I just want to say it again. Thank you for serving our country, because you were you were a lieutenant. How long were you in the military? Lieutenant Colonel, how long were you in the military?
Just over 20 years.
Okay, so long time. Thank you for your service.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Please continue your story.
Oh, you're welcome. And a shout out to anybody serving today, any branch, any service, and the families. It's very much a family affair and dedication.
Yeah, it's a hard job.
It very much is. Yes, it is for all involved.
Yes.
So
thank you for your service. So it's February 7th.
Yes, of 2007. And I was driving on I-75 about 7:20 p.m. in the evening when I was hit by a very drunk driver traveling literally over 100 miles per hour.
Mm-hmm.
And he hit me from behind and broke my axle, shoved that into my transmission. So I didn't have any steering or brakes. And so I slid the equivalent of 8 football field lengths before ever coming to a stop, still in an active lane of traffic on I-75.
Where was that? What part of 75?
It was just outside of the Brandon area, kind of between Brandon and Mango.
Okay.
In the greater Tampa Bay.
Yeah, it's fast. I mean, if you're doing 80, 85, that's almost slow on I-75 some days.
Can be.
Yeah.
I was doing about 70.
So he was a drunk driver, came from behind and just didn't see you, or just?
Well, it's really hard to know what his perception was. He was 0.221 drunk, which is nearly 3 times the legal limit.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
What how I can't comment on
right.
What he.
So he hit you from behind, and then, I mean, eventually I'm sure you stopped, but were you medevaced, or like what was the situation there?
No, I did stop, and then I looked around at my body, trying to see for protruding bones or blood or anything, because I had the wherewithal to know I needed to get out of the car to warn other drivers, since I was still on an active lane of I-75. And just as I had my left hand on my driver's side latch for the door to open, I saw these 2 larger headlights bearing down in my rearview mirror. And I said, "Oh God, please let that stop." And thankfully, it did stop. It was a truck. You could think of it as a local delivery type style truck, rather than an 18-wheeler kind of thing. And that was the moment throughout the whole deal that I had a feeling that I'm going to live. And so it was a gentleman, I call him my earth angel, when he stopped. And I thought, okay, now I'm going to try to get out, because at that point I didn't know if I could walk or, anything, but I'm like, I gotta gotta try to make contact, with that person. I didn't know it at that second, but it was, it was a man. Um, and so I got out and I walked behind my car and it was all crumpled, in and everything. And then I just turned around and looked at the man in the cab and said the words, "Can you help me?" And he was already on the phone. And he later told me he was calling the police and the paramedics.
Mhm. So did you have to have medical attention to leave the scene or?
What happens then is the paramedics come and I I I'm active duty military and I'm a former commander, two-time commander, used to being the one, in charge
Yeah.
and, taking care of everybody else and whatnot. So I declined medical care at the scene and said, I gotta take control of the vehicle. I gotta kind of,
Get this running checklist in your head?
Yes, you could definitely, say that. And they insisted. They said at least let us take your blood pressure. 'Cause, I had headache, and neck pain, and different lots of obviously there's a
It's
lot
so
of
fast.
adrenaline and
Yeah.
things raging through the body, so you feel lots of things. But I was standing on my own 2 feet, and I didn't see any broken bones or anything else. So I'm like, I'm going to just bear down and do what I need to do. So they did take my blood pressure, and the top number was 240,
Ooh.
and the bottom number was equally alarming. And of course, back then I didn't know as much about blood pressure, so I knew that 240 was a high number.
Mhm.
But I had just survived this horrific crash, so I would have been surprised had it not been a high number.
Right.
And so I had to decline it 3 times in writing, and to have them drive off. That I'm not going to get in there. Well, really, what they wanted to do was take me to a backboard, and because I was complaining of the head and neck pain,
Mhm.
and take me to the closest medical facility. And again, being active duty military, I didn't know if that was okay. Because I belong to the military.
Right.
So I'm like, no, I can't do that. I got to go to the military. Run the Air Force and report this and different things. So they, like I said, they went away. They went away, and I at that point too was interacting with the gentleman, the truck driver that stopped, and I said, "Can we call, I have somebody to come help me, come pick me up?" And we did that. And so
So you called a friend or a family member to come pick you up?
I did.
And then did you have any damages after the accident?
I did. Obviously, besides the car, the vehicle damage and whatnot, I had sustained what's called a traumatic brain injury at the scene of the crash, where my brain actually cracked and was bleeding in 2 spots in my skull. And my skull itself didn't fracture. And it's one of those things that I could feel something wasn't right, but I'd never had a brain injury before.
Right.
And I don't know what you would feel like when you have one. I just couldn't, as the example is, I couldn't retrieve my driver's license or my insurance without a number of prompts from the police officer, who was getting very impatient with me, to the point where I said, I understand what you're saying. I just don't know where the doctor, where the driver's license is. And I said, where do most people keep theirs? And he said, well, and most people keep it in the wallet. And I said, all right, let's start there. In my purse, of course, it's one on the floorboard on the passenger side. We got it out and looked in the wallet, and sure enough, there's my license. And then he asked for the insurance. And again, I knew what it was. I could kind of picture the insurance card, but I didn't know.
Just wasn't connecting.
Yes, exactly. And so I said, where do most people? And of course, left compartment, there it was, kind of thing. And so, so, there were signs, but again, I was brushing them off.
How did you know ultimately that something was wrong? And when was that?
I was married at that time, and it was my husband, back then, that actually figured it out. and through some of his past experiences. And he's just, a couple of weeks later, 10 days maybe later, he said to me, I don't want to alarm you, but I think you have what's called a traumatic brain injury, closed head injury. And the first thing I did is I said, "Oh no, I can't have that. I'm not going to do the military. I can't have that." And he had printed out a list of symptoms. And
What were some of those?
20 symptoms. Well, the headache, nausea, the sensitivity to bright lights, the inability to recall language, words, struggle with pronunciations, various things like that. Difficulty sleeping, just a lot of that.
And so did you go see a neurologist after that, or what did you do?
I did. I did. I looked at the list. I had 19 of the 20 symptoms. So I said, all right, let's say I have this. Well, can you help me? What do we do about it? Because I'm like,
Right.
Active duty military service and traumatic brain injury, they don't mesh.
Yeah,
So,
especially lieutenant colonel, right?
yes. So we used the PIP insurance, right? Personal injury protection, is part of our insurance policy, and it's $10,000, and so we used that to go to a neurologist. And the neurologist, she's the one that diagnosed actual injury, and that I was in what's called post-concussive syndrome. And that's when you have a concussion that doesn't heal properly. And so, I'm telling her, I can't, I can't have this.
Yeah.
And I said, all right. I said, write it on a prescription pad. I'm going to take this next time. We're going to take it to the Air Force and show them, because what do we do? I had been to the Air Force military the very next morning after the crash, because I reported it to my chain of command, and of course they could tell I wasn't quite.
I was going to say, did you notice? Did they notice anything at work that was different from before? What kind of things?
Well, one of the things was the computer on my desk. I recognized it was a computer. I knew it needed a password. I even remembered my password. I did not know how to turn it on anymore. It had to be shown how to turn it on. And, of course, I tried to make light of that by saying, horrific crash. I've been awake all night. I couldn't sleep.
Because you went to work the next day.
Very next day.
Wow.
Yeah. I got home around 10:30 at night of the night of the crash. And the first phone call I made was to my immediate supervisor. And then, I just showed up the next day.
Yeah.
And then, we took it from there. And I reported for work as normal. And then they had me sort of, the base medical. So,
Did they diagnose you or see anything wrong at that time, or it was just your husband at the time?
They did, but we were all hoping that it was, like too soon, like it would go away.
That was
That it
temporary.
was temporary. And so, they just said kind of go home and, rest and various things. And, it all unfolded kind of the weeks.
So, because you said it was several weeks after that, your husband said something when you went
No,
to.
about 10 days
Oh, 10
after
days.
the crash. About 10 days after the crash.
And so, what happened from there? So they diagnosed you with this.
Yep, the neurologist in town did, and then I took it to the Air Force, and you probably will not be surprised to know that they have a whole regulations and guidelines that govern everything, to include injuries, and then so there's procedures. When somebody sustains it's a real injury in and out of the military, and so what kind of treatment do they need? What kind of phase in back to what's called full duty do they need? And so I had a lot of what's called cognitive rehabilitation. And I was first put on, it ended up being 12 days of what they call convalescent leave, which is your duty then is to rest, leave your home and do, whatever the doctor is prescribing, and nothing outside of that. And so in my case, it was to rest in a cool, dark room, no mental stimulation, no TV, no radio, no book, no reading, no nothing. It sounds really, really incredibly boring, but the doctors said, and they were right, that I would probably sleep about 20 hours a day.
And you did?
And I did.
Wow.
I did. I would just, get up periodically, obviously, to eat and, eat a little something. But the brain had been like overstimulated, if you will, and it just really needed time to decompress and rest.
So how long did you do that for?
Did that for 12 days.
Okay.
And then I was brought back to half duty for, I believe that was it was either 2 or 3 weeks. And then they countered, after that was 3/4 duty time for that remaining either the 2 or the 3 weeks. And then after, basically 8 full weeks of all of this, I was returned to full duty.
And then how long did you stay in the military after that? Did you decide on your own to leave at some point, or?
Well, you could say I was pretty lucky with timing. I was hit at basically the 18-year point in my career. And once somebody reaches 19 years of service, unless they do something wrong, it's kind of understood that they're in a time of call it sanctuary amnesty, maybe basically that you if you still do everything you need to do, you will be allowed to retire at 20 years of service.
Okay.
So I knew that early on, because I ended up changing positions in the military. I was in a classified arena, and again, brain injuries, and that and I self-identified and all that by letting I was very open with communicating.
Well, it probably changes what you can and can't do with a brain injury.
Right, right. And so you have 85% of healing in year one from brain injury, the ability, hopefully, to heal. And then between year 1 and 2, it's 15%. And then it's trace residual between 2 and 5. And so I'm now, 18 plus years out from that. And I still embrace that the better I take care of myself with proper hydration and what I eat and sleep and rest. I go back, it sounds simple. And in our fast-paced world, it isn't always
It's
as
not
simple
easy.
as it sounds. But those are the things that led me to heal one of the lesions in my brain during year 1. Was they documented two lesions that the collecting blood caused, scar tissue, if you will. And during year 1, I was able to heal one of those where now they can't see that one anymore on an MRI. And so that's really neat.
So did you end up leaving the military before 20 years, or how did that work?
No, as I said, I was able to change jobs.
Okay.
And where I could still perform at a lieutenant colonel level and earn my pay,
Right.
fair work and fair pay and all that. But I knew then that the night of the crash actually effectively ended my career. So then it was about salvaging what was left to try to get to 20. And I had, my record was quite strong. And so the likelihood of progressing well beyond 20, both in length of service and in the ranks that I could achieve was high. But the night of the crash, that ended that.
So before the crash, you were planning to progress in the military and stay in longer.
I was planning to do over 30 years.
Whatever happened to the person that hit you?
His car spun off, and the car landed in the shoulder, and I tried to walk back from my car, those 800 feet distance basically between the two cars because I could. They said, no, 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 no. And I'm like, well, I still have my legs and no bone is protruding. I want to walk. And when I got there, they had put him in the ambulance. He had complained of knee pain, and he was obviously intoxicated to the police officers, and he denied or refused taking breathalyzer at the scene. So they put him in the ambulance and took him to the hospital so that they could draw blood and attend to the knee. And then he ended up fleeing the state of Florida before the blood alcohol test results come back, and was a fugitive, if you will, from the state for 5 years. And during that time, and still to this day, I'm an advocate for educating people to not drink and drive.
Yeah.
There really shouldn't be a reason for it. The Ubers and the Lyfts,
right,
and just all the
autonomous driving cars as well soon.
Yes.
So he's still a fugitive. He was never charged.
No, he in the time I had befriended or made acquaintances, if you will, with the sheriff's department and different things because they go to a lot of events. This was, of course, pre-COVID, so a lot of events in the community where you have opportunities to meet people in these various positions. And just in sharing, a bit of the story, they took an interest. And so they said that they would put in a note in the system that if he's ever stopped in another state, they would be able to see the outstanding charge from Florida. And that's exactly what happened. He has a rap sheet from like my elbow to my wrist. This was the first drunk driving infraction. He was breaking and entering and domestic violence. A young man, 21 years.
So they found him, brought him back to Florida.
They did, and then they, charged him in accordance with the law. And at that point, he had done some prison time, and so he got, like I said, with the law.
What was the how much time was he required to serve, or was he charged with?
He had done, I think, a little bit of time before, and so part of that gets credited in different things. So I would have to look up what the statute is, but he was given, just that and had to pay a fine.
Yeah.
They installed a machine on
the
steering wheel.
Oh, okay.
Various things like that. So he got, like I said, what the law says he needs to get, no more, no less, type of thing. And that was that.
So at what point was it after you served and retired from the military that you decided to start your nonprofit?
The act of sliding those 8 football field lengths, I was conscious for part of that. And when I was actually having a conversation with, you want to say God or spirit or whatever people may believe in. And I was really pleading for my life. And I said, if I was blessed enough to live, I promised I'd spend the rest of my life helping other people. And that I said it and I meant it. And I didn't know what that, well, I was going to say I didn't know what that meant. I knew enough. I said, that I'm a lieutenant colonel serving at MacDill Air Force Base, and some people call that service. And I say, well, I call it the service industry because I'm doing the work and I'm being compensated for it. And the type of service and the helping that I meant to give, if I were blessed to live, would actually hurt me a little bit to give it. And that's exactly what I've done. And so I created Fulfill Your Destiny. Obviously, I had to heal as best as I could from the brain injury and all that. So that's why the accident happened in 2007. Fulfill Your Destiny was formed in 2010.
Okay.
And it's with the intent of helping entrepreneurs and small business owners who perhaps have had some life experience, whether it be injury or can be a tragic layoff,
Something major.
something
Yeah.
major, and where they would benefit from a $1,000 business builder grant to get to another level in their business.
So is that to change paths or just to?
No, I used this story in the earlier years. I did a lot of speaking, motivational speaking, centered around the story.
Mhm.
And I wrote a book called Plaintiff 101, the Black Book of Inside Information Your Lawyer Would Want You to Know. I was approached by a publisher to write the story, to write the book. And I nicely countered and I said, I'm not sure, that people wouldn't necessarily read a book about,
How to be a plaintiff.
well, or just, what happened to me. I said, I countered with that. And I said, how about if I partner with an attorney and we use what happened to me as the model, the example, but we educate people on the system and what's required in litigation and all the terms, what they mean, how to fill out the forms. We give top 50 tips of what you need to know and how to present yourself and stay off social media as an example. And
It's a big thing. If you've never been in litigation, it's a very big thing, and especially like where someone's injured, there's a lot there you should know.
Yes. And that process took 4 years and 2 months. Not the book, the from filing the litigation, the lawsuit. So I had to file a lawsuit against. Well, let me back up. My second call, the night of the crash, we talked. My supervisor was first. Second call was to my insurance company.
Okay.
And my insurance company said, "We're not going to pay a claim." And I said, I don't understand. I was in this crash, and I've been paying all these years, and et cetera, et cetera. And they said, no, if you were hit by a drunk driver, we don't pay those. You have to sue us. And I beg your pardon. And so I learned, from that's exactly what I had to do. I had to sue the drunk driver. He was driving his girlfriend's mother's car without her permission.
Oh boy.
And so but the insurance is with the vehicle. And so, sue that. And then because it's not enough, I had to sue my own insurance company.
Wow. That's a lot. You think
It is. Yeah,
so you paid for it just to make the claim.
Right.
So tell me a story about some of the people that you have helped with the grants. Like tell me, you gave them. They're all $1,000 grants.
They are. We've had a couple programs because of the most recent hurricanes in 2024 season in the area. We carved out a program and gave $500 micro grants, if you will, immediately, during that time frame. But these grants, the business builder ones, are meant to elevate people to another level. And
if you had to think about one person that you've helped with your business builder grant, who comes to mind that you think it was the best example?
The best example that I like to tell is it was during COVID. And during COVID, we all changed how we worked. And so one of the first things to come back were the outdoor farmers markets.
Right.
And so I went and interviewed various vendors without them knowing that they were being interviewed by me. And then I selected a number of them and awarded these grants to them. And this one particular gentleman has a business. Can I say the business?
Yeah, sure.
It's called Maniac's Lobster. And I was interviewing him, and I asked him, if he were to get this money, what would he do with it? And he said, well, he really wanted a second set of equipment, another burner, and et cetera, and various things like that, because he said it's his wife and I. And if we had that second set of equipment, we could work 2 markets at the same time and then virtually double our revenue.
Okay.
And so that's what he used the money for. That's what they do. I'm still in touch with them. I see both him and his wife sometimes on the same weekend when I hit the two markets they're at.
That's nice.
And so that was that's a nice thing. But it's a hard when people ask me. I get that question a lot. Who's your like favorite
Who's your
recipient?
shining star? Yeah.
Right. And it's I almost view them all as an extension of
Yeah.
my family.
Well, they're all different for sure.
and
I
they're
mean,
all different. Yes.
how tough was it for you to start a nonprofit? That's a big deal, right?
It is. It is. And really in the beginning, you think, well, nonprofit, where how am I going to raise money or where's it going to come from?
Mhm.
And mine is set up a little bit differently in that sense, where I always said I'm gonna fund it myself. I'm gonna instead of being an entrepreneur and earning money to live, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur and earn money for my nonprofit.
Mhm.
So I don't take a salary, pay all the administrative costs of the nonprofit personally, and I donate an additional 10% incoming donations.
Wow.
So a true 110% goes out towards helping people in our greater Tampa.
Yeah, a lot of nonprofits, the directors and the people running it take a salary because it's a lot of work,
Yes.
even to run a nonprofit.
And I want to say right up front, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that.
No, there isn't. Yeah.
But I just say from the very beginning, I've never taken a salary. I will not take a salary from it. I use part of the proceeds from the litigation to allow me to do this.
Mhm.
And the reason why I do that is, I didn't want to get paid because a drunk driver hit me.
Right.
I don't view it as personal gain.
No.
I
It
view
would
it
change your career track. I would say it's
Yes.
definitely not personal gain.
change my whole life.
Yeah.
And so I get to decide what I'm going to do with that. And that way I still win rather than having the drunk driver. He took things away from me.
Right.
And so therefore I say, well, I'm going to use it for good. And so my career and my life looks entirely different than when I was a child and a young girl and, adolescent, even in school, all these things, we have plans and ideas. And never in my wildest dreams could I envision where I am today and be doing it this way.
So, what are some of your goals for 2025? When do you think? And I know you and I talked a little bit before the show, and one of your big fundraisers that you would do was a tea, right? Like a high tea.
Yes, it was called Fulfill Your Destiny Spring Charity. It was done from 2014 to 2019, and then of course we all know
COVID happened,
COVID
changed
happened
everything.
today.
Where did you do that at?
We did that at the Empress Tea Room, which
Okay.
used to be
In Brandon. Yeah.
No,
Was
actually,
it on 60?
no, it was actually on Dale Mabry in the Carrollwood
Okay.
area in one of the plazas.
I don't think it's there anymore. Is it?
No,
Okay.
no, it's not. And I say it was also a victim of COVID.
Yeah.
It exists in a different capacity.
Yeah.
And so, but no, it's not there.
So, what all have you done to continue fundraising? Obviously, now that COVID changed, have you done anything different?
I've created sponsorship programs with the Business Builder Grant program itself.
So, you have different businesses that help fund the nonprofit.
Yes, there are different sponsors that would like to have their name affiliated with it or have a presentation made either in their honor or at their company, or sometimes people want to honor somebody that's been deceased
Mhm.
and name brand after that individual or target a particular profession,
Mhm.
different things, all of which are possible to be done. And so
Now, do you have any upcoming events or anything other than the corporate sponsors? Do you have anything else you're trying to?
I have an invitation out to the community, and what that is I currently, Fulfill Your Destiny has an exclusive partnership in this regard with the Tampa Bay markets.
Okay.
And they do a number of markets every month throughout the region.
These are the farmer markets? You're talking
Yes.
about the pop-up markets? Okay.
Yes. And so we award now on a quarterly basis at the markets and to vendors of those markets. But I'm always looking for other partnerships like that.
Okay.
And so that's where, like I said, other organizations, it can be nonprofit, it can be for-profit, corporation, you name it. but you partner, and I can, to a large extent, worry about the funding.
Mhm.
Or like I said, through the sponsor, other people want to sponsor, and there's different way we can design kind of whatever would work best for the person sitting across the table.
So for the person listening, if they want to help with fulfill your destiny, what's the best way someone could get involved or help in terms of like donations or sponsorships or
I invite anybody that would like to go to Fulfill Your Destiny's website, fulfillyourdestiny.org. It's a content-rich site. There's a number of stories of all the people that we've helped out there, and I always say have a tissue in hand.
oh boy.
Some of them are quite special. And there's ways, to either make a donation or contact us there. Send an email. Different things. Phone numbers there too.
Okay, do you want to give that out now?
Sure. The phone number, actually, I'm going to give you my personal cell phone.
Okay.
And my personal, because I have it with me all the time, and you'll reach me. It's 813-816-8990.
Okay, great. And you're on all the social media channels, I would imagine, to fulfill your destiny.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I guess some of the final thoughts I'd love to know for you, what does it mean when you say fulfill your destiny?
For me, that phrase means that no matter what you're confronted with, use it for good and to help your community and live your best life.
Love that. Well, Lieutenant Colonel Mertes, the honor has been mine to have you here on Tampa Home Talk this week. I'm glad I could feature your charity as the charity of the month.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we look forward to having you in the future. As always, if you'd like to reach myself or any of our guests, our off air number is 813-377-2775. You can call or text that number 24/7, 813-377-2775. And remember, love where you live or we're going to fix it. Welcome home.